Okay, we're live. Welcome everybody to another episode of Weekly Web Chat. I'm Dennis Becker from weeklywebchat.com, and I'm pleased and honored to have my guest today, Gene Pimentel.
Hey
Uh,
everyone.
Gene is master of something that a lot of us consider to be the most basic part of online marketing, domain names, and we'll get into that later. But before we do, it's not quite 2 o'clock on my clock. Um, just want to make sure that everybody can hear us. So if you'd type in the chat box that you can hear us loud and clear, I'd appreciate it. And we'll get going in about a minute or two.
I can hear you.
I can hear you too. But again, with that lag, it takes people 30, 60 seconds
Right.
to hear what we're saying. So we'll be patient.
Yeah, I'm liking this the look of this webinar, Jim.
Yeah, and I enjoy it quite a lot. Yeah, people are starting to log in now, so they're starting to hear us.
Yep, yep.
So if you just type into the chat box that you can, hear both Gene and
Hello
I.
everyone. I see everybody popping in, so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Got a whole lot of people logging in. That's great.
Yeah, that is great. People are anxious to hear what you got to say, Gene.
That's good because I have a lot to share.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Sam. I'm assuming you can hear us loud and clear? Yes. They can hear us, Gene. They're
All
starting
right.
to type in, so let's not delay any longer. Um, I met Gene for the first time back in 2009, in the winter of 2009, in Orlando. It was my first ever Earn 1K a Day conference. He had been a member of Earn 1K a Day for a while, and I knew he was a domainer, but I didn't know what that meant. I thought of domains as just the basic building block of a website. You would pay $8 or $10 at the time and buy one and get a server to manage it and use FTP or whatever to move your files back and forth. Back then, I don't even know if WordPress existed, or if it did. I certainly wasn't familiar with it too much, so I was using HTML at the time. But Gene has been the person for, he tells me, well, he can tell us how long later, but he's been a person who looks at domains for more than that. You know, not only that, but more than that, he uses them to profit with, and profit big time in some cases. So, Gene, I'm going to turn the show over to you, and everybody, I think you're going to get a real kick out of hearing what he has to offer here, because I've heard him talk about domaining several times at the different Earn 1K a Day conferences, and it's always a treat. So, Gene, thanks for being with us.
Hey Dennis, thanks for having me. I always love sharing my experience with domaining because it is such a fun business. It's an unusual internet marketing business. A lot of people are confused by it, but it's a business that is stable and it's been steady. I've been doing this for over 10 years, and it's a very steady business that's not going anywhere. It'll be around for another 20, 30, 40 years as long as domains exist. So a little background about myself, I guess I should start with. Um, First of all, why don't you everybody just say, hey, if you can hear me, just to make sure you can hear what I'm saying on my microphone. I know there's a lag, so I'll just keep talking in the meantime. But just type in the chat box that you can hear me. So I'm originally from the Cape Cod, Massachusetts area, and moved up to upstate New York about 10 years ago, right about the time I really started heavily in domaining, actually, because I met my wife, Rowie, and she lived in upstate New York. And we've been here ever since, but we do hope to move back to the Cape Cod area soon. I started out in business way back. I started my dad's importing business. I grew up in that business. And eventually in 1986, I went off on my own and started my own business service, business-to-business servicing business, which included products like printing. I did printing brokerage, mailing lists, graphic design, um, advertising broker, fax and demand, all that kind of stuff. And it was all done through direct mail. I was a big mail order person, and I loved doing that business. But once the internet came around, I kind of morphed into the internet world, and around 1996 is when I started doing that, and took my business completely online instead of through direct mail. Direct mail, of course, is very expensive because of the postage and all that stuff. You send 1,000 pieces of mail, and you hope for a good response. But on the internet, of course, it was so much more open and easy to market. So that's what got me started. And at the time, I recognized that a few domain names were interesting, and it piqued my interest. And I didn't realize at the time how valuable they were, of course, because if I did realize that, I would have bought all the great ones back then. But here I am. I've been investing in domains ever since, profiting from them and teaching others how to do the same thing. Now, I can see that everybody is hearing me, so that's a good sign. And thanks, Debbie. She says, lovely accent. That's the New England accent. That's the Boston accent. It comes out pretty strong sometimes. But let's get to the start of the business that I want to share with you today. I'm going to cover a lot of stuff regarding domaining, and there'll be a lot of information. I might be all over the place because I'm going to cover a lot of different topics about domaining. But I promise you I have a lot of great information to share. Please have a notepad ready. I will be sharing links, and I will paste those into the chat box as I do. But take notes because there's a lot of good stuff here. So some of the things I'm going to cover today, there are 3 levels of domaining. I'll cover that. 3 approaches to domaining, which is different from the 3 levels. What to look for in buying domains. Keyword, whether or not you should get keyword-rich domains or brandable domains, and they both have their purpose and place. Exact match domains, which is another hot subject. Where to sell your domains. That's what everybody wants to know. Buy versus make offer type listings. Parking domains, types of registrars, what it's worth, the value of domains. How do you figure out what it's worth to sell? Expired domains, finding buyers, finding contact information, payments, how to accept payments safely, and domain development. I'll touch on that. So there's an awful lot to cover. So is everybody excited about hearing some of those topics? I hope you are, because it's very exciting once you know and understand what domaining is all about. Please ask a lot of questions. I love to answer questions directly, so please, as things are presented to you, feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like, and we may answer some along the way, but most of the questions will be answered at the end. So just keep a note of what you want to know, and I will help to answer those. And Dennis, if you keep an eye on that, if there's something pressing, we'll go ahead and answer that right away as it happens.
Sure will, Gene.
Okay. So the biggest question I get about domaining, people who don't quite understand the business, is domain flipping still alive? Is it still a valid business? I have to laugh at that question because to me that's like saying, is real estate still alive? Domain and web properties, selling domains and web properties are like selling real estate. There are highs and lows. You just have to know where to go and what to do in order to make it profitable for you. I will go as far as saying that it's more profitable right now than any other time in my 10 years of experience in domain flipping. There are a lot of hot opportunities. So you just go where the money is, and we'll talk about how to do that. So I want to ask you a question. Do you realize that there are 1,000 times more domains available right this moment for you to register than the total number of domains that have ever been registered before? That's a mind-blowing thing to think about, because that just tells you that it's wide open. There is so much opportunity to be available for registering domains and selling them. It's all about supply and demand. Um, Years ago, when all those million-dollar domains were registered, people didn't know they were worth that much back then. It's only years later that they became very valuable. The same holds true today. You can register domain names that become valuable as you go along. The domains you register today can be worth a fortune down the road. But Dennis, are you hearing feedback? I'm hearing quite a bit of static here.
No, you're pretty loud and clear to me, Gene.
Okay, as long as I'm not coming across fuzzy, I'm hearing a lot of background noise, I guess. So here are things to keep in mind. First of all, premium domains drop by the thousands every single day. Domains are something that are renewed once a year. So there are a lot of domains that drop every single day. As a matter of fact, 90,000 to 100,000 domains drop every single day, and they become available to the public to register once again. So there's a never-ending supply. New markets are created every day. New businesses pop up every day. The number of businesses that come online grows at a staggering number every single day. So there's wide open opportunity for sales there. It's up to you to connect the dots and see where the profits can come from. Your ability to recognize opportunity will determine whether or not domaining is dead or alive for you. It can be, it's like that old saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So one thing, I'm going to give you a link here to a site that can give you a feel of how alive domaining is. It's called dnjournal.com. If you go to that site, as a matter of fact, I am going to screen share so you can see. Once I open my browser here. Okay. This is a popular website for domainers. It gives you a lot of information about the current trends in domaining. It's a very old-fashioned looking site, but it has a lot of great information. If you go to domain sales, you can see what has sold very recently in the past week or two. One of the big ones this past couple of weeks is z.com, just one letter, or some would say z.com. Sold for
Your screen share isn't showing. It's just your avatar that's showing.
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know why.
Let's see what happened here.
And it's not your live face on video either. It's your avatar. There you go.
What do you see now?
Now I see you. Now I see.
What do you see?
Now I see.
Do you see the screen share?
Yeah, I see the screen share now.
Okay, good.
Is that dnjournal.com?
That's dnjournal.com. And if you click on, I'm going to go back to where I started. Right here, it's domain sales. Click on that. And you don't have to do this now. I'm just giving you a quick overview of what's happening. Z.com just sold for almost $7 million. And it gives you a list of all the domains that have sold recently. Not all the domains, but the ones that have been reported by several merchants. So you can see there are many in the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 range. That happens thousands of times every day. So domaining is very much alive and well. Let me get back to, let's see if it'll share me. Am I back?
Yep.
Okay, so it's working. There are two great places. Where I learned most of the stuff I know about domaining is from namepros.com and dnforum.com. Paste those in now. so you have a reference of it. Those are great domain. Those are the two biggest domaining forums where you can learn just about everything you want to know about domaining, and they have marketplaces and so forth. So I really recommend, if you're interested in domaining, to go to those two forums and do a lot of learning there. Let me cover the 3 levels of domaining. Your involvement in domaining is pretty much one of these. You either register domain names yourself for $10 or $12 or whatever the registrar charges for domain registration. You can do the second level of participation in domaining would be auctions and back ordering, where you spend a little money, you know, $69, $70, $100 for a domain name, and turn around and sell it for more. That gets a little bit more, you know, you need a little bit more money to do that. Or you can do full-on investing, where you spend a couple $1,000s for a domain name and sell it for $10,000 or more. It all depends on where your comfort level is and what you want to focus on. So those are the 3 different levels. 3 different approaches. There are different ways to sell, and I call them 3 different approaches. I call the quick flipper, the value seller, and the profit maximizer. A quick flipper is when you buy a domain name for anywhere from $10 to $100, let's say, and you sell it right away for like $200 or $250 or $300. That's a good day if you can sell one a day. And you turn your inventory over quickly, and you can do many of those in a day. The second approach would be a value seller, where you spend maybe $100, $200 on a domain name, and you sell it for $1,000 or $2,000. And that's just as approachable, because you can sell and make a much bigger profit. You just have to get into the selling game and understand how to do it. Then there's the profit maximizer, where you register domain names with the intention of holding on to it. Not a quick flip, but you hold on to it for a period of time, and you wait for the right buyer to show up, or you approach buyers, but it can take months and years before you sell that domain. So I'm talking about the domains where you would invest maybe $1,000 or a couple $1,000, and when you find the right buyer, you can sell it for $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000. One time I did that, I sold a domain for $24,000. But you have to wait for the right buyer to come along. So those are the approaches. Now, what kind of domains should you register? Anybody that knows me knows that I always recommend .com only. The same effort you put into a .com or a .net or a .org or any other extension, it takes the same amount of time, same amount of effort. Actually, it takes more effort if it's not a .com. But why .com? Because .com is what businesses want, first of all. And you're selling primarily to businesses as opposed to individuals. .com has a much higher selling price and a much faster sale. If you have .nets of the same thing that .coms, as opposed to a .com, it'll take you much longer to sell, and you'll sell it for much lower of a price. So .com is where it's at. That's where I focus all my attention.
Gene, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
Would that vary if you're like in the UK? Would .co.uk be as good as a .com over there?
Well, that would be a country TLD. And when you're selling to a local business, those are probably more appropriate for the local market. If you want to go global, though, .com is still king globally.
Okay.
So it really depends on who you're selling to. You can never go wrong with a .com because it's a globally recognized extension. The local country domains are very good too, but you have to be focusing on just selling locally.
Okay.
So does that make sense?
Yeah. And when you were showing the DN Journal page, I noticed that there was a pretty high price on a .mobi.
Yeah, and those are pretty hard to sell, actually.
Really?
Yeah, but you know, sometimes when you see a .mobi or .whatever, even .coms, at a higher price, it's because there are other things that come along with the domain name. Sometimes it's a website, sometimes it's traffic, sometimes it's lots of backlinks associated with that domain name. So there are other variables involved. I pretty much focus on just raw domain names, which doesn't include any of that stuff, because I hand register most of the ones that I sell. But you have to be careful when you're looking at when you're researching domain names and what they've sold for. Some of them do have those extra things attached to them, which increase the value of that domain that much more. So .com is deeply embedded into the consumer mind. If you tell somebody to go to such and such a website, they almost automatically type .com at the end and go there. So that's why .com is important as well. .com is usually harder to find for a business, so that increases value right off the bat. It's all about supply and demand. If they can't find it easily, they'll rely on somebody like you to find it for them. Now, an important factor about .coms, if you register a .net, or if let's say a business registers a .net or .org or whatever other extension, and they don't own the .com, they will lose a lot of traffic to the .com owner, because people do by default just type in .com. So that's why it's important. If you're building a business with a domain name, you want to have the .com for sure. I can't stress that enough, because that's a very important factor. Now, I don't want you to get the impression that I think that .com is the only thing you can sell, because it's not. There are many very successful sales that take place with all extensions, but because .com is so much easier to sell and it's so much more value than most other domain extensions, that's where I focus my effort, because you want to be as efficient as possible. And recognize the fact that there's only one of each domain name. When you register a domain name, that's the only one there is. Just like people, you're a unique person. A domain is unique unto itself. So if a business wants that domain name, there's only one place they can get it, is through you if you own it.
Right, except for, if you're talking about a unique person like Dennis Becker, there's plenty of Dennis Beckers in the world. And someone registered DennisBecker.com long before I did. He's a real estate agent somewhere, and I can't get my own name. So.
Right. Well, in that case, the name itself may be duplicated, but the person is not.
Yeah.
So the value is in the person, not the name in that case. But what to look for? I have a checklist that I pretty much follow for everything that I register when I register domain names with the intention of selling them. And here's my list. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can do a screen share of this list so you can follow along as I talk about them. Tell me if that pops up, Dennis.
Yes, it does.
Okay. So my checklist is basically, number one, .com, like we just discussed. Number two, no digits or dashes. A lot of businesses use their domain names for radio advertising, newspaper advertising, and there's nothing that throws off a consumer more than having a number in there or a dash, and they don't remember what it was when they get home. And to vocalize a domain name that includes a dash is very difficult sometimes. So avoid digits and dashes. No trademark issues. You want to do, you want to try to avoid trademark issues. Most of the time, it's pretty obvious. Like, you don't want to include anything with Sony in it. You don't want to include anything with Google in it. Any major brand names. There are ways to research to see what trademarks are owned, and we can talk about that a little later. Easy to remember. You want a domain name that's easy for the consumer to remember. You don't want it to be very complicated. 2 or 3 words is ideal. One word sometimes does not describe what the intent of the site is enough. 2 or 3 words gives it better description, but yet easy to remember. Strong commercial intent. You don't want to register domain names based on what people are looking for free. You want them to be looking for, you want a domain name that people are looking to spend money with. Good cash flow industry. You can register domains all day long for the hot dog stand down the street, but if you register it for a chiropractor or a lawyer, there's much more cash flow in that industry, so it's much easier to sell because of that. Decent prospect pool. There's a quick way to research to see how many potential buyers there might be for that particular domain name. You want to make sure that it's not de-indexed by Google or other search engines, and there are ways to find that out. And you don't want it to have a shady reputation. Some domain names were used for bad purposes previously, and you really don't want to have that. You don't want to be involved with that if you register that domain name and try to sell it to somebody, and come to find out it's people. The bad reputation follows that domain name. Well, let me get back to myself here. Okay. So, as far as domain history, what it was used for in the past, there are two sites that you can easily do a little bit of research on. I'll give those links right now. Archive.org and domaintools.com. Archive.org will let you research and see what the domain was used for in the past. And Domain Tools, let's go to that one. Screen share again. Okay, so we're at Domain Tools. Do you see that, Dennis?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And if you go to Products and click on Screenshots, here's an example, nasa.gov. It'll show you screenshots of what the domain looked like at different times in the past. So we have a lot of displays here of 2013, what it looked like. Then you can click on older to see what was even older than that. So it's a good way to see what was on the website that that domain name contained. All right, so one of the big questions I always get is, should I focus on a keyword-rich domain or should I focus on a brandable domain? They both have their places, and here's my answer to that. A brandable domain name is a better choice for building your long-term business. There's nothing like having a very short brandable domain name. Like, think about Yahoo, Google, Facebook, so many others out there. The issue, the thing about a brandable domain name, a branded domain name, is that it takes a lot of advertising and promotion to get the consumer aware of what that domain is all about. When it first starts, nobody knows what it is, but once you do enough promotion and people get used to it, they understand what it is. On the other hand, a keyword-rich domain will tell the consumer immediately what the site's about. Longstemroses.com. You know what you're going to get when you get there. And that's pretty much an instant recognition factor when you use a keyword-rich domain name. So for long term, it's good to establish a branded domain name for your business. But for selling, it's very difficult to sell a brandable domain name when it includes a strange word that nobody's ever heard of before. But keyword-rich domain names are much easier to sell because people recognize them right off the bat. So that kind of brings us into exact match domains. Now, what is an exact match domain? What that means is that it's pretty much what people are searching for on the net. So if somebody is searching for, I don't know, think of an example. My mind's blank. Let's say men's diving watches. Okay. If people are searching for that term on the web, then if you have that exact domain name, there are benefits to using that exact match domain. There's been a lot of talk about, yeah, Google has devalued them, but that's not true. Google has devalued the substance on the domain name. The website is what's important, what you contain on the website. But here are some of the important reasons why an exact match domain is still very helpful in this day. And number one reason is click-through rates. When people do a search for mensdivingwatches.com and they see that your result pops up on the search results with that exact domain, they're much more likely to click on that domain name. So that helps you out with traffic. EMDs, exact match domains, are normally easy to understand and remember, so that's an important feature. EMDs convey an immediate message, and it's easily recognized and therefore immediately usable to attract new business. For example, if you one example is Dell. Dell uses a domain called cloudcomputing.com. Why don't they just promote Dell and send people there? Well, because if somebody's looking for cloud computing and they see that domain in the search results, they're likely to click on it. So it brings them more traffic based on what people are searching for. That doesn't mean that it's going to rank any easier in Google. That just means that when people search for it and see it, they are more likely to click on it. So it really doesn't matter what the search engine rankings are in comparison to other domain names. So let's talk about where to sell domain names. The first thing that I recommend in selling domain names is to get them up on Cedo.com and Afternic.com. Those are two websites that are industry leaders. You can list domain names there, as many domains as you want on those sites for free, until they actually sell. Once they sell, you pay a small commission. So that's a very attractive thing for somebody who's registering domain names with the intention of selling. Let me paste those URLs into the chat box. And I'm not going to go there now, but you can explore those at your leisure. But once you list the domain names on those services, millions of people browse those sites to look for certain domains that they want to buy. So you have a built-in audience. And the listings stay up there forever. It's not just a temporary 1 week or 2 week thing. They're there until you take them down at no cost to you. So that's nice. You get wide exposure through registrar partners. They are associated with many different registrars who send traffic to them. So somebody does a search on their particular registrar for a domain name and sees that somebody owns it, it'll link them back to your listing on Cedo or Afternic so they can buy it from you. It'll reach domain buyers when they're looking to buy, so that's a great feature. And it's a set and forget type of situation where you don't have to worry about maintaining it. You just list it and forget about it. Once you have them listed, you can use that link to send your own traffic to if you like, to get a bidding war going if you want. Now, a really cool site that I discovered is called namerific.com, and I'll paste that in, and I'll show you what that looks like because it's a really neat site. Okay. Do you see that, Dennis?
Yes, I do.
Okay. This is one way. If you do have brandable domain names, that's what this site is all about. You can list your branded domain name on this site, and what they do is they actually create a logo. See all these samples? These are domain names that people are selling, and they actually create the logo and put it up for sale for you. They do charge a higher percentage than the other types of sites, like Afternic and Cedo, but these are for when a business is looking for a funny-looking name for a brand for their own, and they do a lot of marketing for you. So I believe the current percentage that they get for the sale is 30%. But again, you just list it, and when it sells, you pay. You don't have to pay anything up front. For example, this Zeta.com, Geysor.com, they're just made-up names, but it may appeal to a certain business. So you can list your brandable domain names on this site and just sit back and wait for the sales to come in. All right. Let's see what we have next here. Excuse me. There's a website that's fairly new called freemarket.com. That's another place you can list domain names for free. I just pasted that into the chat box. And when you're selling domain names, what I highly recommend is in your registration, what I do is in the business slot, just type in the words, "This domain is for sale." This way, anybody that looks you up on Whois will see that your domain is for sale. Just another way to capture some attention. Now, let's talk about buy now listings versus make offer. What should you do and when? Well, you would use, when you're listing on Cedo or Afternic, what you would do is, if your intent is to sell a domain name quickly and as efficiently as possible, list it with a certain price that you're asking for. The other alternative would be to use a make offer listing, which is, you just put make offer and people will submit bids based on what they want to pay for it. However, by having a buy now price, you're 10 times more likely to sell the domain name quickly. I would only use the make offer type listing if it's a very important domain name to you and you want to get top dollar, because you don't want to state a price and then realize that they would have paid 10 times the price down the road. So the domain names that are more valuable to you, use the make offer listing. The ones that you just want to flip quickly, use the buy now feature. Again, I'm referring to sites like Afternic and Cedo.com. Now, people ask me about parking domain names and what that's all about. Back in the day, parking domains is really not a good way to promote your domain names these days. Back in the day, when you parked a domain name, that just meant that you register a domain name and list it with a parking company who puts up a one-page website with various ads on it. So every time somebody clicks on the ads, you earn a few cents. I've had domain names in the past that have earned me over $500 in one day just for people clicking on ads. That is very rare these days. All my domains combined may get that in a month now. But that's something you can do if you have a domain that's people would tend to type into their browser to visit automatically. Somebody's looking for red roses and types in redroses.com, and if you have a parks page there with ads on it, which is automatically done for you by the park company, you earn money every time somebody clicks on the ads. But unless it's a very popular site where people would automatically type it in, then it's really not going to be effective. Used to be really effective, but these days it's not so much because Google and other search engines don't index them into their search engines anymore. I've got a question for you. Ownership of a domain name. Who owns a domain name? This is something I was talking about with some associates the other day, and the fact is nobody owns a domain name. Think about it. If we actually owned the domain name, you wouldn't have to pay a renewal fee every year, right? Because you own it. But we're just caretakers of that domain name. We pay for the privilege of using it. That's basically what it is. So if you do something wrong with it or you're accused of using it incorrectly, it can be taken away from you. The domain name itself is simply a label that is attached to the IP address of the website that you go to. Nothing more. So nobody actually owns the domain name. You're just using it for your business, or you sell the rights to it to someone else, for the purpose of building their business. But you don't own it.
So that begs the question, Gene. You mentioned that you can have it taken away from you if you do something wrong.
Right.
Are there registrars that are a little more sensitive to what they consider right versus wrong? Like I've heard GoDaddy might be one of those.
It's funny you mention that, Dennis, because that's my next subject.
Okay. All right, sorry.
So that tells me that I'm on the right path here. Yeah, there are really two types of registrars that you can use. Um, as far as what I break them down in my mind, and it's a consumer-oriented type registrar or a domainer-oriented registrar. They both do the job equally as far as registering domain names, and the pricing is pretty much the same. But consumer-oriented registrars like GoDaddy, like Namecheap, like all the others out there, they tend to side with the consumer if a complaint is filed. Um, there's really not a lot you can do about that unless you want to use what I call a domainer-oriented registrar. Domain-oriented registrars understand the domain business, and they side with the owner of the domain name until they're proven guilty. If you do something wrong, there's nothing that's going to protect you. But if you're innocent, you want to be innocent until proven guilty, and that's what a domain-oriented registrar will do for you. My important domain names, I always use a registrar that's a domainer-oriented domain name registrar, because I don't want a simple dispute like somebody files a spam complaint. Many of the consumer-oriented registrars will just shut you down right away. They may take away the domain name if they find that somebody hacked your domain and started sending bulk email. That's all your responsibility. So you lose the domain name. Like I say, there's nothing wrong with either one, but just be aware that your important domain names can be taken away from you unless they're protected by somebody who understands the business. I particularly use a domain registrar called Uniregistry, and I'm going to type in the URL here. I also, believe it or not, I mean, for years I've told people not to use GoDaddy.com, only because there are so many problems in the past where people have lost their domain names because of silly reasons. But I do use them when it's simply for domain flipping. When they're not very important domain names to me, I wouldn't cry if I lost them. GoDaddy is very good in the sense that you can register a domain name for $2 or $3, and then you flip it right away for several hundred or several $1,000s. Why pay the full registration price when you can use one of their coupons and register it for just a couple of bucks? And when you're registering hundreds of domain names, that adds up real quick. So I do use GoDaddy for the purpose of domain flipping. And if I happen to lose a domain name or two, I don't care, because I'm saving so much money in the process. But if it's a domain name that's important to my business, I'm going to use Uniregistry to register my domain names. It's a much more secure way to have your domain name protected. So let me give you a site where you can actually compare the cost of different domain registrars. And that's domcomp.com, and I just pasted that into the chat box. And I'll do a screen share of that right now. So here we have a chart of the cheapest, the second cheapest, and third cheapest domain registrars.
I'm not seeing your screen, Gene.
Okay, let me see if I can get that going. It shows it's.
There you go.
Let me try it again. I'm clicking share. Is it up yet?
Yep.
Okay. So there are 3 columns here: cheapest, second, and third, and that's just pricing. So as you can see, the cheapest is 1-in-1 registrar, and I have to say I don't like them. Here's the GoDaddy for $1.49. You can register a .com domain name for $1.49 by using this link. I have nothing to do with this site or the link. It's just there for you to use if you want to use that. But imagine the savings when you register 100 domain names or even 10 domain names. Instead of spending 10 or 12 bucks each, you're only spending $1.49. That's a big savings, and it makes the burden of domaining much easier to handle. So this is a good chart to give you the lowdown of what the different extensions cost and what the different registrars charge. So how about a show of hands? Is anybody getting good information? Are you happy with what I'm presenting to you? Do you have any questions at this point? Give me a little bit of feedback. And while I'm waiting for that, because there is a little lag with the Google Hangouts, I'll go on to the next subject. That's renewals. Renewals, I have to really stress that when you're doing domain flipping, you want to be able to sell your domains that you're registering within the first year that you have them, because you don't want to have to pay for renewals every single year. But if you do have domains that go longer than a year, you can look for renewal coupons from GoDaddy or other registrars, and here are a few tricks to do that. You can simply type into a search engine GoDaddy renewal coupon, and you'll find sites that do have coupons for renewal discount codes. Here's a neat little trick. Post an update on your Facebook wall using the term GoDaddy renewal coupon, and you'll start seeing ads in Facebook for renewal coupons. You can actually use Gmail for the same thing. Create an email using those same keywords, GoDaddy renewal coupon, and send a few emails back and forth to yourself using those keywords, and you'll start seeing ads pop up in your Gmail account for discount coupons. So that's a great way to find affordable renewal coupons. Okay, so I want to talk about hosting in combination with the registrars. The important thing about this is never host your website in the same place where you've registered your domain name. Some people, a lot of people do that because it's convenient. But think about this. What if somebody complains about your website? What if somebody complains about something on your hosting account or hacks your hosting account? The host will shut you down, and now you don't have control over your domain name at all because it's registered at the same place. So if you have your domain registered at a separate registrar other than where you have your domain, other than where you have your website hosted, you can simply change the pointer on your domain name to go to a different host, and you don't lose a beat. You can have that up and running again in 2 minutes if you want to get your site going. But if you register your domain name at the same place where you host your website, then you lose all control. So keep that in mind. That's a very important tip. All right, let's see. So one of the hot topics in domaining is what's my domain name worth? People want to know how much should I spend, how much should I charge for my domain name? How do I know what it's worth? First of all, remember what I said earlier, every domain name is different. So what you decide you want to sell a domain for is what you should sell it for. If you sell it low, you can sell it quickly. If you sell it high, it'll take longer to do so. So it really depends on your mindset and how much you want to turn the money, how quickly you want to turn your money over. Just to get a feel for the market, though, here's a great site that will let you compare your domain name with other domain names that have already sold. So you can get a feel for what your domain is worth. And here it is in the chat box. It's called DN Prices with the dot before the ES. And let me go to that site to show you what that's all about. Are you seeing this one, Dennis?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So, for example, let's type in, let's say you want to compare a domain name that has the word video in it. Type in video and search. Now, it'll show you, here are the domain names, and here is the selling price of the domain names. So videocards.com sold in January of 2007 for $35,000. And the highest one here with the word domain in it was music videos. That sold for $250,000 at cedo.com. So this is a great way to compare your domain name. Just look down the list and see what's close to what you have to offer, and it'll give you a good feel for the market. Um, videoplaylist.com sold for 5,000. So, and that's also at CEDO. So you can see where the domains were sold. Great site to do some comparison shopping. Another one is called namebio.com. There it is in the chat box. And you should see NameBio on your screen now, hopefully.
Yep.
Okay. So let's do the same thing here. I'll type in the word video, choose .com, and do a search. And here we go. We have the sales prices, and they're all over the place. Here's one for 2,000, one for 800, one for 3,000. So you compare it with what you have to offer, and it gives you a feel for what the market will bear for your domain name. Okay, let's talk about expired domain names. One of the biggest things that I do in my domaining business is look through the daily expired domain lists. And the quickest way to do that is through a site called namejet.com. There it is in the chat box. And I will bring you to that right now. Okay, so here's namejet.com. It's a site that handles all the expired domain names and puts them on auction and so forth. But if you go to the download section, you'll see a list of the daily expiring domain names. Any one of these listings you click on, it'll give you a list of 90,000 or so domain names, because that's how many expire every single day. That gives you a list of domains you can search through. You know, put your keyword in your search box in your word processor or whatever, or in your spreadsheet, and you can locate excellent domain names. There are some very premium domain names that expire on a daily basis. Let me open one up just to show you. Let's open that. And I'm going to switch to that list. Okay, so here we have a list of domain names that are expiring on December 4th. And as you can see, I'll go right to the bottom. There are 88,000 domain names that expire on the 4th. So you can search through this list for keywords that you want that are relevant to the domain names you want to register. And there are some really premium domain names in this list. Keep in mind that many people have access to this list. So if you want to register one, you have to be quick. An alternative to registering them yourself is to use the auction listings at Namejet. Namejet lets you back order a domain name for $69 or so. And what that means is when you back order a domain name, you have to commit to spending $69. And if they are able to snag it for you from the expired domain list, it's yours for that price. If someone else bids on it as well, then you have to bid against the other people that are bidding as well. So it's an auction type situation. But you can pick up domains worth $5,000, $10,000 for very minimal cost. So that's a great way to profit from domain names if you have the funds to invest.
If you don't win that domain, do you lose your $69?
No, it gets credited to you.
Oh, okay.
So you don't lose the money. As a matter of fact, there are three major sites that do this, and you can back order the same domain name from all the sites at the same time, so in hopes of one of them capturing that domain name for you. And the one that gets it for you is the one you pay. So let's see what we've got next here. Well, I guess we need to talk about finding buyers. How do you find buyers for your domain names? There are many ways, of course. The ways we've discussed so far are pretty passive by listing them on cdo.com or afternic.com. But you can proactively seek out buyers for your domain names. And one of the easy ways to do that is to go to a Whois search site and look for domain names that are similar to what you have to offer. For example, let's say you owned a website called example.com. You could look to see who owns examplesite.com and let them know that you have a website that's a domain that's even better for them. So you can look up to see how many other websites have your keywords and approach those prospects. A better way actually is to go to Google or any other major search engine and see who's advertising based on the keywords in your domain name. So if you have a domain name redroses.com, you can type that into the search engine and see who's actually spending money based on those keywords. You know, who's advertising in the sponsored ads. Approach those companies and show them what you've got. Those are the ways that I've done it for many years, and it's very effective. You just have to be consistent with it. Another great way to do it is to, let's say you have a real estate domain name. You can go to real estate forums, or whatever niche that you have your domain name for, go to the forums in that industry and participate in the discussions. And in your signature, you may have a link to your domain for sale. Or you can use their marketplaces. That's a very targeted audience for your domain name. So if you use their marketplace and show them that you have a domain name that's very appealing to them, you're very likely to sell it at those forums. Okay, so, and yes, you do email them. Don't spam. You know, there are regulations, obviously, against doing spamming. Approach them one-on-one if you're doing emailing to particular prospects you find in the search engines. Let me give you a link here to what rules you have to follow in order to do that. It's called the Can Spam Act. And this is the FTC Gov site that gives you the exact rules. I just pasted that into the chat box that you have to follow to do to be able to send unsolicited commercial messages. You are allowed to, but you just can't. You have to make sure that you put your own contact information in there. Let them know who you are. You have to give them a way to opt out of your mailings if they do not want to hear from you again. It's very flexible. Now, this is in the U.S. In Canada, it's different. In other countries, it's different. So be aware of that. Check the regulations in your country. As far as receiving payments for domains that you sell, the safest way to do that, the way I do it most often, is using escrow.com. And here's that link. And basically, escrow is simply the middleman. You know, and it protects both ends of the transaction. Your customer's protected because they are secure in sending their money to escrow, and they're not sending it to you, somebody they don't know. And you're protected because the domain name is not released to the buyer until their payment is cleared. So it's a very safe transaction. Now, small domain sales like $200 or $300, quite often just use PayPal and take the risk. But if you have a higher domain sale, you want to use something like escrow.com where you're protected. You won't lose the money if somebody bails out on you. And of course, as you are registering domain names, you can register a lot of them that look really great for development purposes. Um, you can seriously increase the value of your domain by developing the domain. Of course, that takes a little more time and effort, or you can outsource the work. Uh, but if you develop a website on a domain name that's geared to driving traffic and advertisers to that site, there's a lot of money to be had doing that. I prefer, for the most part, just to sell the domain name itself and just keep that rotation going. But I do outsource websites on occasion to develop them if they're a really outstanding domain name. So I think at this point, that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover. If there's anything that you want me to go back and cover in more detail, let me know. And Dennis, if you have questions in front of you that you can share with me, otherwise I'll scroll through the list.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions I've seen.
Okay.
Let me ask one. Gene, do you tend to mostly hand register your domain names for like the minimum price straight from the registrar, or do you participate in the $69 auctions or buying them for $100 or $500 and sitting on them for a while,
My
or
primary
all of the above?
all of the above, but my primary thing is to hand register all my own domain names because I know how to find the exceptional ones, and I know how to snag them. There's a few tricks that you have to learn how to get ahead of others, in registering these domain names. But I do well with just hand registering my own domain names, and there's less risk because it's so cheap to do. Spend a couple of bucks at GoDaddy or whatever, and you have them on the market for up to a year before you have to renew them. So that's where my primary focus is, on just registering great domain names on my own. If I see one that I really love and I want to invest in, I'll do that and turn around and maybe hold on to it for whatever time it takes to find a buyer. But because I like to flip domain names quickly, hand registering them is a good way to go.
Of the ones that you register, about what percentage are you able to sell within
That's
the first year at least?
Yeah, well, once you get to really be experienced in it, you can sell. Typically, it's hard to put a number on it, but I would say 1 out of every 5. So if I spend, if I register 5 domain names at $3 a piece, let's say, that's $15 I've invested. But I can sell the one that does sell. I'll sell between $500 and a couple of $1,000. So I could register dozens and dozens of domain names and still be profitable if none of them sold except for one.
Okay, great. And you've been doing this for over 10 years?
Over 10 years, yeah.
Yeah. Making a full-time living.
Right. And
you're an inspiration to us all.
It's better than it's ever been.
Great.
And, there are many domainers out there that are in the market just to invest in the top dollar domains and sell for $50,000, $100,000. That's not me. I don't take those risks. I could if I wanted to, but I just love what I do with the hand registering and just quickly turning them over. I don't want to sit on a domain name more than a year. I want to be able to flip them real quickly.
So if you were to buy a domain at GoDaddy for like $1.49 that your screen showed, and I'm sure the reason they're willing to sell at those prices are that they're thinking that most people are going to renew them at full price.
That's exactly right.
And but you won't.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, if I do have some at GoDaddy that go longer than the year, I'll transfer them out to my other registrar before that happens. Because the GoDaddy renewals are like $15 or more.
Okay, so that's where they get you.
Yeah, that's where they get you. They make up for it because they are taking a deep loss at $1.49. Even at $5, they're taking a loss. It costs them a good $7. So they take a deep loss up front in the hopes that people will renew them as time goes on.
That's understandable. So, okay, let's go through some of these questions. I don't know if you're looking. They go way back. Um, Mike says, when does an existing company have the right to exert ownership over a domain you have registered? I guess that goes along with taking it away from you if you do something wrong. And I remember another question, what's on the list of things that you can do wrong?
Well, sometimes it's not a matter of what you do wrong, unless you are sending spam, spam that you're not supposed to send. A lot of times it's simple complaints. People complain because they think they're getting spam from you, or they don't like content on your site. They think it's inappropriate, so they complain. Or a hacker gets into your site and does things that really, that they'll install, spyware and stuff like that. So that can be done without your knowledge, but yet the domain can be taken away from you because you're responsible for that domain name. As far as a company trying to take over your domain name because they're claiming the rights to it, that'll happen if it's a trademark that they own, obviously. A lot of times you get trademark notices from companies that just want the domain name, but they really don't have the right to it, so you have to be careful there. It gets hairy sometimes with trademarks.
What if you've registered the domain long before they registered the trademark?
Well, there's a lot of gray area, and it becomes, a decision of the court. They'll weigh out all the different criteria. Typically, when you own the domain name and you're using it for a different purpose than what the trademark owner is claiming, you're free and clear. You can register Windows.com and use it for window installation in the home, as opposed to Windows operating system, and Microsoft can't come at you for that, even though it's Windows, a trademark that they own. A trademark can be established in many different industries. So unless there is confusion to the consumer as to how you're using that trademark, that's when it becomes a challenge. So the overall thing you want to do is just try to avoid trademarks wherever you can, unless you know you're using it in a completely separate industry that other trademark owners with the same name are using. Let me give you a site here called trademarkia.com. And on that site, you can do some searches for trademarks. You can also search the trademark database in your particular government and do some research that way. Let's see what other questions we have here.
Okay, Joseph says, we own a trademark and somebody else has the domain name. Any suggestions? Which goes along with what we were just talking about.
Right. Well, it depends on, there are so many gray areas. You really have to consult with an attorney, unfortunately.
Right.
There's nothing I can say to direct you in one direction or another because I just don't know. Every situation is different.
Someone asked something about leasing versus selling domains. I know you've gotten into that or talked about that a lot. I don't think you talked about it today, but that can be pretty lucrative, right?
Absolutely, and actually that's where I'm focusing a lot of my attention is on recurring income from domains. What I have is a system that I've just developed called video domaining, and it involves videos, but what it does is allows you to rent a domain name to especially local businesses that need a web presence and need good search engine rankings. And once you establish that for them, I establish that for them ahead of time without them, without them knowing. Then I approach businesses that domain can apply to and say, hey, look, I already have this domain name ranked. It's got a website on it, and you can own it or lease it, rent it for X number of dollars per month. And they would be a fool not to grab it at that point, because if they don't get it, their competitor, their local competitor will. Because I'll approach everybody in that industry in that area and make the same offer to them. One of them is going to be interested, and if one of them says no, I say, well, okay, it's going to your competitor. Even if the competitor doesn't buy it or rent it right off the bat, I may give it to another competitor just to show the one I approached that, yeah, it's being used by somebody. So if you want it, here, you can rent it from me.
So you're renting or you're buying a domain that has like the city as part of
Yeah,
the domain name.
that's one thing I didn't talk about is geographic
Right.
local domain
So
names.
like Orlando Red Roses.
Exactly, yeah. There is such a huge market for that right now. Businesses are coming onto the internet in droves because they know that that's where the advertising is happening. So if you have a local domain name, you have a very small universe of prospects, but it's so easy to rank a local domain name because of that factor. So if you have a city in the domain name with the niche in that domain name, like OrlandoPlumbers.com, a plumber in that area, in that city, would be nuts not to want that domain name. It would help their business. It would help, when people search for that term in Google, they'll see that domain name. So it's very easy to rent a domain name like that to a business. And it's such a wide open field. So that's where I'm spending a lot of my time is with local domains.
And it's not like you're scamming them for outrageous amounts of money. I mean, those
No,
people
no,
are advertising in the yellow pages. They're advertising on radio and in newspapers and cable TV maybe. And they're used to spending money on advertising, and this is just another way to generate
right.
more leads.
And the results I can get them by doing this far surpasses the results they'll get through newspaper or radio or any other medium, and for a much lower price. So it's a win-win situation. You're giving them real value, and they're loving you for it, and they'll keep paying you for it month after month because you're bringing them new business. And I'm going to pop in the offer that I have coming out soon called video domaining. And if you can see that, if somebody wants to know more about local domains and renting local domains, go ahead and click on that link, and you can get on the early bird list with this program that I'm releasing in a couple of weeks, or maybe even a week from now, called video domaining. So get on that list, and you'll get all the information when it does come out. What other questions do we have here?
Let me see. I might have missed some, so I'm going back up. Let's see what I can see. Andrew, that one of the latest links that you gave to the ftc.gov, that long link, Andrew said it comes up with a 404, but I think that's just because the link isn't entirely clickable on Webinar Jam.
Oh, okay.
If you hover over it, it only goes Spam Act, and then the Compliance Guide Business doesn't get loaded. So you have to type that all in. When I put up the recording on weeklywebchat.com, I'll put all these links up, and they'll be clickable there.
Well, in the meantime, all you have to do is in Google type the search term "can spam," C-A-N-S-P-A-M, and it'll most likely be the first result.
What do you think of Flippa for selling?
Flippa is a great site for selling a fully developed website. People that shop at Flippa typically want something that's already income producing. Domain sales, I haven't had good experience with raw domain sales on Flippa because people are not typically looking for just a domain name. They want a full website that's already producing income. And it costs you, whatever it is these days to list each domain, and it's only for a very short period of time. So it's not very effective when you have 100 different domain names you want to list and sell. If you have an exceptional domain name, it can be worth it, obviously, because if it's something that somebody wants, many people want, it's worth spending the 19 or 29 bucks to list it. But when you have a lot of domains to offer, it's difficult to make that profitable because of the listing costs.
Araxi says, I have a domain name registered renewed for 3 years without a website. It's a sought-after niche. I don't know what to do with it, or I don't know what to ask for it.
Well, use one of those comparison sites that I showed you and look for similar domain names to see what a price range that they're selling at. And then, approach different companies in that industry that have those keywords that are, search Google to see who's advertising with those keywords and approach them and tell them what you've got. It really doesn't have to be complicated.
David says, do you normally renew names or just let them drop if they don't sell?
It all depends. A lot of domain names I register with the intent of keeping them for years until the right buyer comes along. So of course I'll renew those. The ones that I think are valuable, I'll keep those renewing year after year. Even if I had to renew a domain, 5 times, that would cost me what, $50 or so, and I can sell it for $500 or $1,000. It's still worth it. It all depends on how quickly you want your cash to convert. How quickly you want to flip it over. But you have to use your best judgment and decide which ones are worth renewing and which ones you want to drop. I tend to drop about maybe 30% of the domains I register, just because I focus on other domains. I'm always registering new domain names. So where I want to spend the time is where the ones I keep registered.
And you have the experience to know what a good name is, really.
It does take, getting to know the market. Absolutely.
Right. Juliana says, where do you sell the most domain names at?
Through direct contact. Approaching businesses that use those keywords, approaching businesses that I do it. A lot of people do it backwards. They'll register a domain name and then look for prospects. I do it the other way around. I look for prospects first, and when I see there's a wide open market, I will register a domain name that will be suitable to that market and then approach those people. That way I know that there's a potential buyer pool right away.
Awesome. The new TLDs, few people have asked about this. The new TLDs, are they worth pursuing? I think you've said loud and clear, probably not.
Yeah, probably not if your intent is to do domain flipping. To use them for your own, or to use them because they have backlinks already established, or because they have traffic attached to them. Fine, but you have to keep in mind that most of the time when all these new TLDs come out, what it is really just a moneymaker for the registrars. They make millions of dollars every time they release a new TLD. So of course they want to release as many TLDs as they can. None of them are as effective as a .com.
I don't know if this question is more technical than you want to get into today, since we're already running longer than we thought we would, but how do you transfer the ownership when you sell the domain?
Good question. There's when you move a domain name from yourself to the buyer, there are 2 ways to do it. One is called a push, and one is called a transfer. A push simply means moving the domain from your account to the buyer's account within the same registrar. A transfer is when you move the domain from your account to the buyer's account at a different registrar. When you do a transfer, it's much more complicated, and there's a lot of back and forth and email and verifications and so forth. When you do a push, it's instant. So that's what I do with almost all of my domain sales, is to do a push. Now, what if the buyer is not at the same registrar as your domain name? Very simple. You create a second account for yourself at the same registrar, push the domain from your main account to this brand new account, and then give the buyer the login information for that brand new account. They own that way they own the domain instantly, and there's no hassle.
That's great. That's great. Couple questions about what your typical leasing price is for a domain.
Well, there are a lot of variables in that too. It starts at $100 a month to $1,000 a month, basically. You can even go, much higher than that if you have the market for it. For instance, if you're leasing a domain name to auto repair shop, the price may be a lot lower than if you're leasing a domain name to a lawyer because one single client for the lawyer can mean $10,000, $20,000 or more, obviously. So if you're able to bring in one new client, one new paying client for that lawyer, that gives the lawyer tens of thousands of dollars, obviously that value to that lawyer is much higher than a customer you can bring to an auto mechanic or something. So you have to take all that in consideration. Also, the economy of the location that you're selling to, whether it's a big city or a very small town somewhere, and how much competition there is in the niche that you're marketing to. If there are only two different businesses in that niche, in that town, it's going to be tough to get a good price. If you have 10 different competitors in that town, you have a much better chance of selling it, renting for a much higher price, because one of them is going to want it and not let the other ones have it. So there's a lot of different factors to consider.
I don't know if you saw it, Gene, but you've got a fan here, Patricia, gave a great testimonial for you. You might want to talk to her about using it in the future. I don't know if you read it, but
I know I missed that, so I'll have to look for it.
It's towards the top. She has your local domain empire product, and she pre-ordered the video domaining product, and she's definitely a rabid fan, she says, of yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Patricia. I really appreciate that.
I see a lot of questions that have overlapped. Some we've answered already, so I'll just buzz right by them.
Right.
George says, what do you think of Estibot for their selling program and their valuations?
I use them quite often. I think they're fantastic. I buy a membership from them because I use it quite often. They have a lot of great tools to use for research and for marketing. They have a built-in lead generating thing that is fantastic. I tend to do lead generation on my own, find prospects by searching search engines, but they do have a very easy-to-use interface that lets you research domain keywords, and actually they list different prospects that are potential buyers for that keyword. So yeah, I do recommend them.
Okay. Anybody that doesn't have their questions answered already, type them in again. We might have passed by them inadvertently. So Sam is agreeing with Patricia about what she said about Gene. Sam says the man is a legend and the support second to none. So I just wanted to get out there.
Thank you, Sam.
Mary, when would you put content on the domain or just sell it for the name only? Is a criteria that you follow?
Yeah, no, almost all the domains I sell are just the domain only. I don't want to spend time building websites. I want to spend time marketing the domain name. But that being said, there are ways to generate websites that are really quick and easy. I have a few products, as some of you know, that do allow you to install a website in under 3 minutes. So that makes it feasible to spend a little bit of time to give some eye candy to the buyer. Most of the time, in the past, I've sold just the raw domain names. The more value you can add to a domain name in the way of a website or what other things you can attach to it, like traffic or backlinks and so forth, of course it increases the value, but it also increases your workload. So if you can get into a system that's routine for you, that's what's important, consistency. I have a routine where I sell just a domain name, so that's where I'm consistent. So all depends on where you're at in your mind.
George asks, as far as contacting, do you mainly use email or do you sometimes go on the phone?
I always use email first as the contact and back and forth. Quite often they'll want to call you. I don't call businesses directly. I don't do cold calling, but I will get on the phone if they want to talk to me on the phone. That's not a problem. Because at that point, what do you get to lose? Just answer the phone and answer their questions. They're calling you. You're not approaching them trying to sell them something. So that makes it easy.
Patricia says, yes, you can use her testimonial, and she's nominating you for president and me for vice president. I don't want that job. I don't think she does either.
I appreciate it, though.
Yeah, we certainly do. Okay, we've got to the top of the list. Any last words, Gene?
Well,
I think you've given a lot of value here, and I
thank you. Yeah,
appreciate it, and I know these people do too.
yeah. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I have so many different resources I can share, and of course, I do have products that I offer. But my thing, if you want to really learn the business, you want to get into domaining and learn how to profit from domaining, learn from people that are doing it. Myself, of course, but go to namepros.com, go to dnforum.com, and just see what everybody else that is actually doing the business is doing. There is so much good information on those forums. Um, Other than that, look me up, and I'll help when I can, and check out videodomaining.com and get yourself on the list, and I'll send information as it comes out.
And of course, anybody that's inside earned 1K a day, Gene's been there for a long time, and he's there
Right.
every day, I know, and he's very responsive to any questions about domaining. He's also in the I Am Inside Track Facebook group, which I know a lot of the people that are listening to this would be in.
Right.
So, and I think if you asked a question there and tagged his name, you might get a response. I don't want to commit him to a full-time job as support, but
Right.
he's always been very good in the past.
I'm very interested in answering questions when I can. So.
Okay. I think that about does it, Gene. We've gone close to 90 minutes now, and
Excellent.
I thank you, and I thank everybody that's on this webinar today live or on the recording. And if you want to, if you're listening, if you're watching live now and you want to rewatch, it's going to be in the archives at weeklywebchat.com within 30 to 60 minutes after we end up here today. If you're watching the recording, then I guess you already know where the recording is. It'll stay there for the duration, along
Right.
with all the other web chats as we've had in the past with some very expert people in their own particular areas of expertise. And I'm wanted to get Gene on sooner, but he had some things going on, and I finally got him to do it. And Gene, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I think that's all for me.
It's always a pleasure, Dennis. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I know. And any questions that we weren't able to get to, if you're a member of the forum, post them there for me. I'll try to answer them, or in the Facebook group that Dennis has, the IM Insider. Just post the questions, wherever you can reach me, and I'll try to do my best to answer them.
And Gene is undoubtedly going to be at my next seminar in June 12th to
Oh yeah.
14th in Las Vegas. If you want to meet the legend, if you want to meet the legend in person, there's your opportunity.
I look forward to that every year.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks everybody, and thanks Gene.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.